Hello and welcome to Cage's Brew Pub. If this is your first time here, I'm Cage and I'm a streamer, content creator, and community builder. Today I'm going to be walking you through a tutorial of how I use Notion to organize everything that I need to do. While I won't be using advanced tactics, this will not be an introduction to Notion. You should have some understanding of how Notion blocks work in order to tackle this tutorial. For a great beginner's course, I suggest the Storytelling Collective's Notion 101 course. As far as the organization system that I'll be using, I use an adaptation of Forte Labs' Para method. I'll be briefly explaining what that means, but for more information on how to organize your life using the Para method, or for the Storytelling Collective's Notion course, check the links in the description box below. There are a lot of other videos out here that are like this one, but I'll be explaining how I use Notion as a productivity tool using a from-scratch workspace, meaning I won't be using any of the templates that are provided with Notion. The true Para method stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archive. My acronym reads a little differently. I use Projects, Areas, Library, Tasks, and Archive. I'll be giving brief examples of each of these as I go through, but it's important you take some time before creating all of your databases to really list out the things you plan to include in here. So if you don't have a running list of all the different projects and tasks that you need to do, I definitely suggest pausing this video now, grabbing a sheet of paper or a new Notion page, and starting to write out and list out truly what it is that you all have going on. As noted by Forte, projects are items that have a definite end but cannot be completed in one sitting. For example, planning a wedding or writing a paper could both be projects. Areas, on the other hand, are overarching groupings of projects that have no end time, or at least something that spans an extended period of time. Family could be an area wedding planning might fall under, and school could be an area that writing a paper would fall under. The library is basically a reskin of what Forte calls resources. This is a space where I like to keep important notes, clip articles, or save web links related to the projects I'm working on. This could be anything from a great marketing research article to a tutorial on how to do a proper French knot, or resources for writing that paper. You can also use that space to put in a habit tracker, a recipe catalog, or movies you want to watch. Tasks are the individual to-dos of a project. Booking a venue, creating an outline, reading a chapter, or scheduling tweets could all be tasks for different projects. These should be things that can be completed in a shorter period of time and have a definite endpoint. And then lastly is the archive. This is where all of the above gets filed away when they're no longer currently relevant. With Notion's great search functions, you're able to quickly find an old project that maybe you need to do again, like writing another paper. You can revive the old one instead of recreating it. Now, all of these pages will live under one parent page. Ashley Warren of the Storytelling Collective calls hers the brain. I've called mine the nexus or the hub. Feel free to name yours whatever makes the most sense for you. This page serves as a parent page for all of your other pages, so it should make sense with whatever your aesthetic is. We'll just use the hub. So now we're going to start off by making some relational databases where content is all connected. I find it easiest to start with a projects page, so let's turn this into a database. You can adjust these columns however you like. However, mine has columns for the name of the project, which I just usually call project. It has a spot for timelines. And for this, we're going to make sure that we choose the date option. Then we have one called status. And for that property type, we're going to use the select. Now you can make these whatever you like as well, but generally what I do is I use in progress, complete, not started, canceled, or recurring. These also generally have a color coordination for me. So in progress for me would be yellow, complete is green, not started is usually red, canceled I think is fine as pink. I think I've also used gray, and then recurring can just be blue. I use these status formats in another table as well, so having them matching can be helpful. And then next, we also have ones for areas and tasks, but we'll be getting to those in a minute, as those will be relational columns. So we can start off by naming a few example projects. So we already mentioned maybe wedding planning is a project, maybe writing a paper is a project. Another example of a project could be record YouTube video. So these are all items that are going to have to-do lists, and they also will have they'll fall underneath different areas. So if we want something that maybe falls underneath the same area, maybe as well as writing a paper, maybe our class also has presentations. We're gonna do a presentation for the class. So for my timelines, I use one where it has an end date. And then I can mark the start date and the end date for that. So for wedding planning, maybe we started that this month, and that's something that will happen in the future, right? So let's just say that we're getting married on Christmas Day. So that would be my timeline for this project. So maybe for writing this paper, it's a summer course. So our start date maybe is on Monday and it's due in 2 weeks. So that's a much shorter time frame. We're wanting to record a YouTube video in August. That's starting August 2nd, and we'll give ourselves a few weeks to complete that task. And then maybe our presentation comes after writing the paper. So once we turn in that paper at the end of July, maybe in August, we have that week to prepare our presentation. So this one would be marked as in progress because we're currently doing this project. And then these other ones here are not started. All of the information in this database can be filtered. So that'll come in handy when we start creating some of the other parts of this workspace. This database, as well as the next few databases, will be primarily used for recalling data rather than displaying it. So it's not super important to make them attractive, but you can definitely add sorting to make them functional. So maybe I want to add a sort and I want to do it by timeline because I want to have that in order of when I need to pay attention to these things. So now that we have a few projects written out, let's sort them into areas. We can go back into our hub. We can turn the areas page into a database. And we can do something similar like we just did with the projects. So in the areas database, we'll only have 2 columns. So we'll have the name of the area. And then we're going to have a callback to the projects database as a relational column. So when we click here, we choose our property type. We want to go into advanced and select relation. So now we're going to select the database that is our projects database and create that relation. So we're going to call this project. So now as we create areas, so for example, we had a family for the wedding, class for the project and the paper, and content creation for the YouTube video. So now we can recall that information from the project database. So for family, we've got wedding planning. For the class, we've got our presentation. We've also got the paper. For content creation, we've got our recording our YouTube video. So now you can see on these places here, it's relating back to that area. And we'll go into that a little bit more as well. I like to make a gallery view of this page because it's easier for me to see the content. So we can add another view, make it a gallery. So let's sort this alphabetically by area. And then maybe for the class, we add in a cover photo. And what's nice is you can use Unsplash So maybe let's look up notebooks. And this one looks nice. You can add that photo then to your page. And then when you go into your properties here, you can say that you want your card preview to be your page cover. And then that'll show that nice picture. You could do that for these other ones as well, just to make it look a little bit nicer. All right, now let's write out some tasks. So we'll go back to the hub again. We'll turn the tasks into a page. And we'll make this one a database as well. So this one is always my largest database. Its columns will include the name of the task, the task deadline, again, will be a date, the status, which will reflect what we put in the projects database. So we'll write these out again as not started, in progress, completed, canceled, and recurring. And we'll go back in and we'll make sure that they match the colors so that way I can tell exactly what it is just by a visual cue. And then we're going to do a relation back to the projects database. So we'll add another column, make it a relation, and select the projects database. Call that project. So let's type out some sample tasks that maybe would go with some of the projects that we have. So maybe we need to reserve a venue. Maybe we need to book a caterer. Research, paper, create slides. And then for the YouTube video, we'll just put record as one of our tasks. Obviously, each of these projects will have more than just a couple of tasks, but this is just a great way to create an example. So let's just say reserve a venue is something that has already happened in the past. So that maybe was due on last Monday. Booking a caterer is something that we have to do before the end of the week. Researching information for your paper is going to be happening on Monday as you start the paper. Creating slides is something that will happen in August, probably in the middle of that point. And then recording the video is probably something that you'll be doing near the end of the month, after you get everything else put together. So let's just arbitrarily pick some of those dates. Reserving a venue should already be completed. Booking a caterer is maybe something that's in progress. And these other pieces maybe are things that haven't been started yet. Now, just like what we did with the previous database, we're going to connect these to a project. So reserving a venue is going to go with wedding planning. Booking a caterer is also going to go with wedding planning. Researching a paper, we'll go with writing your paper. Creating slides, we'll go with the presentation. Recording, we'll go with recording the YouTube video. Now this will be the final relational database that we create. Before we make the library, let's look back at the projects and areas pages. Now you can see the areas and tasks related to each project as well as the projects that relate to each area. You can see these items are put in here. So with wedding planning, it's part of the family stuff. And for that, we need to reserve a venue and book a caterer. If you don't like seeing these on this, you can also go to your properties and just turn those tabs off. That's not something that you want to view on this page. And then in areas, again, you'll be able to then see some of that information there. And you can also go in and have it list those items underneath. So if you want a great visualization of how many projects you have in each area, you can easily see that there. All right, so going back into the hub now, let's create the library. We'll make that into a page. And we're going to just start that off with just an empty page. So similar to how we created the hub, this is just going to be basically a list of pages. Sometimes they might have databases in them, but I'll generally make them an inline database rather than a full page database. But this is maybe where you keep your recipes, movie list, or paper resources for writing that paper. So of course you can turn these all into pages, and you can add all that information as is needed. You'll also be able to see them in here as well, which is nice. And then finally we'll make the archive. So for my archive, it automatically populates. So we're just going to create a blank page. And we're going to make some inline databases. So instead of making the entire page a database, we're just going to add them into here. So I have a projects database. So we're just going to link our projects database into here. So here's all the different databases that we have. We're going to link the projects database in here. I like to make these pages a full width because you get to see more of your database in there. All right, so on this view, we're going to create a filter. Where the status is either canceled or the status is complete. We only want to see projects in here where those two things are true. So we can move some of these things around to organize it how we'd like. And we'll come back and we'll see how that shows up later. So I do the same thing with the areas database. So again, I'm going to go in and create a filter. For this one, I don't have a status set up for this. So instead, I'm going to make sure that the project is empty. So if I don't have a project in an area, it's going to show up here. And then lastly, we're going to also do a task database. So we're going to link another database. We're going to grab the tasks one. We're going to create another filter. So for this one, we're going to do similarly, where our status is either canceled or the status is completed, which we should see that reserve a venue in here because we completed that task. Again, you can create other views like your gallery view for areas. But every time you create a new view, your filter will change. So if you want to make sure that you are only showing ones that don't have projects, you'll want to make sure that you change that filter as well. So that's the start to our archive. All of the pages within the hub, I would say the one that I reference the most is going to be the library, because everything else is going to be pushed to the next page that we're going to create. The next page that we're going to create is going to be a landing page. So we're going to actually add a completely new page. We're going to call that the home. For the home page, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this page. So definitely check out the Notion 101 course that I mentioned earlier if you want to learn more about how to create a landing page, especially when it's aesthetically pleasing. But essentially, this is going to be a collection of filter databases to show me the most relevant information to what I need. So I'm going to create 4 major data blocks. There's going to be one called today, one called this week, one called overdue, and one called my project timeline. So let's create the today block. This is going to be another linked database. This is going to be linked to tasks. So if we wanted to name that, we can just call that today. And we can change this into different headings and things like that as well if we want it to make it look pretty. Again, it might not be a bad idea to make it a full width page as well. So the way that we're going to filter this is we want to make sure that the task deadline is today. If the task is today, it's going to show up in here. The other filter that we want to add, however, is that we're going to add a group and where the status is not canceled or completed. We don't want to focus on stuff that's not necessary for us to know. So let's create our next part here. And this is going to be the ones for this week. So let's call it this week. Again, I'm going to create a linked database for our tasks. All right, so we want to filter this so that way it's only showing us tasks that are going to come up in the next week, not including today, that we have not completed and are not canceled. So let's create a filter group where the deadline is after today and the deadline is on or before 1 week from now. And we're gonna add another filter group where the status is not completed or canceled. This should only show us stuff that's going to be coming up in the next week. And then we're going to do our overdue. This is going to be another linked database. Going back to our tasks again. All right, so we're going to create another filter for this so that way it shows us any task that is overdue from today and is incomplete. So we're going to go ahead and go to filter, where our deadline before today, and a filter group where our status is not completed and not canceled. Oh, I'm sorry. This has to be and. All right, so we've got these major pieces here. Our final one is actually not going to be a task database. It's going to be a project database. This is going to be our project timeline. So we're going to create another linked database. This is going to go to projects. All right, so what we want to show on here is any projects that have a timeline that are not completed or canceled. So we'll create another filter group. The timeline, I'm sorry, the status is not complete or canceled, and where the timeline is not empty. So these are all of our different pieces here. We probably want to sort this by timeline. We don't necessarily need all of this information in here, but what's going to be important for this is we're actually going to add a view and we're going to make it a timeline view. We're going to create that timeline view. It's going to display it in a different way here now. So again, because we created a different view, we're going to have to add that filter back again. So our filter group again is going to be that the status is not complete, canceled, that the timeline not empty. Okay, so we can now see in here that we are currently working on wedding planning We got a paper that we're gonna have to write pretty soon. And then there's the presentation and the YouTube video coming up. Again, because we changed the time to timeline view, our sort was removed. But as soon as we put that back into timelines, it puts them in order of when those things will happen. Now, the reason why I added a timeline view like this, something that I think is really important within this, is something that actually comes from Forte Labs again, is that it's a good idea not to have too many projects going at one time. So the sweet spot is noted as being it's kind of 8 to 10 projects. That gives you that productivity without that burnout. So if you go through this and you create this and you have a lot of projects in your timeline, it might be good to consider wrapping some up before you commit to some others. Because of the way that this works as well, you can see what's coming up in the future. So if somebody asks you to do something within the first week of August, you might be able to then very visually see, well, I have a presentation that I need to work on, and I have to start with my process of recording a new YouTube video. In addition to having wedding planning as well, right? So you can see that there's those 3 bars there. So that might be a week that maybe you don't accept any more tasks or projects that you need to work on. So let's see this in action, right? So let's say that book a caterer got moved to today. So now you'll see that it automatically shows up in today. And we mark that as completed. I screwed up that filter on this one too. This should be and. I think I might have done that on other filters as well. But so once we mark that as completed, it's removed from today. But now we can see that these items have been completed, so they're showing up within our task list. Now, if we go back to our home page, which has this information in it, let's say this was actually due yesterday. We'll see it goes into here. Now, if we go into our projects and say we have our areas, and we have our class, and let's say these items are completed. Now, if I go into my archive, you can see that my class is here. And all those properties don't necessarily carry over from view to view. So if you want your card preview to be that cover image. Now, if a new project comes onto my plate, we can go back to home, or we can really add it to any of these databases in here. But let's just say we wanted to add a new task. So maybe the task is related to our YouTube video. Maybe I want to contact collaborators. I can just type that in here and go to the projects, add record YouTube video. Status is not started. I can even open this page and that information is here as well. I can change the deadline. This is a project that's in the future, so maybe that's due on the 9th. Now, if I go into our projects page, I'll see that information here, contact collaborators. Now, let's say we have a completely new project. If we go back to the home and we want to just type that right into here, maybe our project is that that we need to design a book cover. And one of the tasks for that is to research images. We can type in research images here, and in project, we can just put design cover. We can add that to our projects. It's not started. We can go to our projects now, and design cover is in here. Now we can tell it to give us that. I'm sorry, that was the wrong button. Yeah, that timeline. It's not started. So we can just type in a new area then that's maybe book design. You can add it in through the database pages, or you can do a lot of that right from the home as well. So I think we made that sometime in September. We could just change the date. And as it comes up, it'll pop up in this week. And if you want to see what tasks you have coming up further down the road, you can go into here again. Maybe adding a sort by deadline might be helpful, and you can see what that looks like. There are pages that I know I'm going to use a lot. I can also favorite them and they'll show up in my sidebar. So if I'm into the library page, maybe I know I'm going to reference my movie list a lot. I could just go into the movie list, favorite it, and it's going to show up on my favorites. I also tend to favorite my home page just because sometimes it'll default to what the top favorite page is. And I like this being my landing spot. And of course you can open any of these pages up and it'll show anything that's nested within those pages as well. What's really nice about Notion databases is that every single time that you create an item in here, that creates its own page. So now, for instance, we're writing a paper, I can open this and that's its own page. So I could add in a task list or any other type of database in here by making another linked database. I can actually also, if we wanted to link to a page, maybe I want to link to the resources page that we had earlier. Now this is the exact same page that's in our library underneath paper resources. And lastly, don't be afraid to make it look nice. This is a page that you're going to be looking at a lot, so take advantage of the resources that Notion provides you by adding in a cover image, icons, background colors, and etc. to make your page uniquely yours. And aesthetic design isn't just for looks. Visual cues can also make us more efficient. And this page doesn't have to stay this way. Feel free to change it up weekly, monthly, or just whenever inspiration hits. Thanks for joining me to learn a little bit more about how I organize my life using Notion. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Cheers!